One of the primary things you should always have with you when you go in the woods is some sort of tying implement. So cord, string, rope, wire, whatever it may be. Currently I got a little hank of bank line or tarred nylon rope. Up here in Canada it's often called seine line or cod line because this is what's used for making nets. But you can also have parachute cord, mule tape. There's a lot of types of rope you should have. And bring as much of it as you can. There's always a use for it, from tying together a frame to hanging a pot to binding things together to carry them, whatever it may be. You always need some sort of rope or cordage. But sometimes you lose it, you run out of it, you damage it, whatever it may be. Or sometimes modern day synthetic cords aren't what you really want. If you're trying to hang something by a fire, tie things together to cook on the fire, you don't really want to use something made of plastic because, well, it's not going to taste very good and it's not going to hold up very well against the heat. On the other hand, plant fiber, like this retted basswood bark or this dry cattail leaf, that stuff can be used in a lot of different ways. But how do you make rope? How do you make string from this stuff? In this video, we're going to show you. So these are the strands of the inner bark of a basswood tree. We retted them. The way you ret is you take the bark, the whole enchilada, take it, put it in a swamp, slow-moving creek, even in a lake shore, and you leave it alone. How long you leave it depends on the conditions of the water, how full of bacteria it is, how cold it is, how warm it is, if it's got a strong current or a fast flow, anything like that can kind of determine how long you leave it. Minimum, no matter what the conditions, a month. If you got really cold water that's flowing fast, you can leave it as long as 6 months. This stuff we actually retted back in May, started the ret back in May, and then we pulled it out in August. And that was left a beautiful coloration from the bacterial growth. And what's going on, as we'll explain in a more further video, in a more detail and further video, is we're actually taking it and we're letting bacteria break down the sap and the sap glues and all that stuff involved to make this, leaving just the fibers, the non-sugars of the plant strands. And with that, you get this beautiful, soft, fibrous material. Not very good for lighting a fire, but very good for making strong, durable rope. I've got a strand here, and there's a lot of ways you can twist it. And what we're going to start off with is a very simple one. This is how I learned to twist string. And it's just simply called hand twisting. And what I'm going to do is both my hands are going to work opposite to each other. And it's often, as you're going to learn with plant material, it's better to have your hands a little damp. I got a little cup of water here beside me. Pull that out of camera line. And you just start to twist it in one spot until it starts to get really tight, and you watch it really carefully. It makes it kink. That's the beginning of your string. I'm going to grasp that with my thumb and forefinger. Now I've got two close to equal. I'm going to actually shorten one. Pretty straightforward. You always want one slightly shorter, and we'll explain that later when we get into splicing. What you want to now do is think of this one being the top one and this one being the bottom one. But simple way to remember this is there's always going to be one at the top and always one at the bottom, but they're going to constantly be changing sides. So we always work with the top side, and again I start twisting it. Well, the way I'm trying to twist it is away from me, up and over. So if I was to face the camera this way, I'd be spinning it clockwise to you. I'm going to start twisting that top one clockwise to you, or up and over. And when it gets nice and tight, almost when it's getting ready to form a kink, I take my middle finger or index, ring finger or pinky, whichever one you feel comfortable with. I prefer my middle finger. And I hook the bottom one, and I rotate counterclockwise or up and away. Now the bottom one is on top. You see how it's not twisted? The bottom one is now the twisted one. And I do that again. Twisting away from me, up and over, clockwise, however you want to describe it. And when it gets nice and tight, hook, spin. So it's twist, hook, spin. Twist, hook, spin. Twist, hook, spin. Twist, hook, spin. Kind of repetitive. If I bring that up close, you can see a very nice, tight twist to the grain of the fibers. Now what we're trying to do here is make a string that holds together. It doesn't fall apart when I let go of it. If I just spun these together by hand like that, they slowly fall apart again. It doesn't hold on to each other. This reverse wrapped string has a lot of strength. It actually triples the strength of the fiber. So if this is, let's say this is 5-pound test, which give or take it is at this time of year when it's been retted and processed and dried, When I twist it like this, it becomes 15 pounds strength. So 5-pound breaking to 15 pounds to 15-pound breaking. That's a pretty good average. Now, if I actually twist in a third one, which we'll do in a future video, and you add a third strand, you actually quadruple the strength. So you go from 5-pound to 20-pound. So, hook, spin, twist, hook, spin, twist, hook, spin, twist, hook, spin. And as I'm going, I'm constantly pinching it with my non-twisting hand. I'm going along, pinching it along. And that allows me to keep a nice tension on it. Now, the problem with this form of cord making is the fact that every twist is going to be a little different than the last one. Every time I twist, I might give it a little bit more length, I might give it less length, I might twist it 6 times this time, and the next one I do it 10 times, and that causes a very uneven twist, which means although this has 15 pounds of strength of breaking, it could be stronger if I kept it even all the way through. But when you're learning, this is the easiest way I've ever learned, especially with basswood cord. This is how I was taught when I was about 14 years old by a woman named Kari Sattler. She taught me quite a bit when I worked in an outdoor ed center as a kid up in Wyerton, Ontario. And as you can see, you can do this with milkweed, you can do this with dogbane, you can do this with a lot of plant fibers, willow bark, whatever it may be. It's a very easy way to twist. But there's other ways to do it, and we're going to get into that next. Now, a fast way to make string is the lap roll method. Now, the lap roll has some benefits and it has some detriments. The benefit is you can make a lot of string really quick. It also has a fairly even twist, so it's a little stronger in some aspects. The downside to it is it's harder to control the tension. And the more twist and the more tension you put into the cord as you're twisting it into rope, the stronger it's going to be in the long run. But if you're trying to make a lot of cord fast, like you need to make a bunch of string to make a fishing net, or other things that don't necessarily need to have all the strength in one strand, it's a good way to do it. If you're trying to make one fishing line, though, I recommend the hand twist, or with the next method that we're going to be demonstrating, the mouth twist. Lap rolling or lap twisting is much faster than either other method, though. So we're going to get into that right now. What we do is, holding with the non-dominant hand, we're going to brace the 2 strands, making sure our hand is a little damp, or the string itself, the plant fiber itself, is a little damp. We're then going to keep them separated and roll them at the same time, keeping them separated the whole twist. When I get to the end of my roll, I simply let go and then help coax it into a twist. And what that gives me is an entire 1.5 inches with one strand. With one push of my hand, I get an 1.5 inches. Now, in comparison, it took me 3 minutes to get an 1.5 inches in the last twisting, in the hand rolling method. So, again, we just simply brace it, pinch it, keep the strands separate with our twisting hand or our dominant hand, and roll forward. Now, it's easier to do this on either a bare leg or on denim or duck fabric. So Carhartt pants, jeans, things like that. Not so easy to do with swim trunks, I'll tell you that right now. When it's a smooth fabric, it doesn't want to roll. If you're wearing rain pants, it's not going to want to roll. So it comes down to what you're wearing. If you have a pair of nylon shorts on, like some people like to do when they go canoe tripping, I would actually recommend just simply pulling your short leg up and rolling right on your bare thigh. It's got a little bit more grip, especially for us hairy folk. So again, we just simply pinch with our non-dominant hand to keep them separated, roll with our dominant hand, and when we get to the end, we let go. And it gives us another 1.5 inches. So in 3 twists, I've got about 4.5, 5 inches of cord already made. That's a really good set. That's a really good method of getting a lot of cord fast. And that's the real benefit to the lap roll method. Now, the problem with making cord is splicing. A lot of people don't really understand it. If I was just a twist, if I had this end and this end at the same point, the cord would only be about maybe as long as this. And then you would have to stop. And people just tie it off and they think, okay, my rope's done. But how do you keep making a rope? How do you keep going once you get to an end? The trick is you don't have them at the same point. Both ends of your cord can't be even to each other. If this end was over here, we would have a weak point. It would just fall apart. So we have to have one strong strand or one strong bite, or another term you want to use for making rope, and a cutoff point. Then we take another strand of approximately the same diameter, give or take, And it's all about feel. You can feel when something's not the same diameter. It might look the same. These two look pretty close to the same. In fact, you might think this one's thicker than this one, but this is actually thicker than this. So I actually have to grab another strand of material for now because it gets thicker as we go. So I'm just going to grab a little piece and add it in. And that'll give me about the right diameter by feel. Yeah, that's what the right diameter there. And if you notice, the ends are frayed. And that's actually a benefit. Because if you think about it, I'm taking two things and trying to put them together. If they're nice and smooth and solid, they're not going to join. If I take frayed ends and stick them together and twist them, they're going to lock. They're going to hold on to each other, kind of like a hand grasping onto another hand. If you hold on like that, it's a very strong grip. So we take that frayed end, make sure we got all the pieces together. We take that frayed end, and I usually try to get them into threes. So there's 3 groups there and 3 groups here, and I interlock them. Just like that. And then I just lay them down flat in the directions that they were originally going. Like that. You see there's a big bundle here. You can do things to make that easier. You can actually trim this. If you have scissors or a knife, you can trim this and taper them. I don't really find a need for that most of the time. If I'm making a really, really smooth line for sewing or weaving, then yeah, I'll get rid of it. But it doesn't really seem to hurt too much. Some people say that it weakens the cord. I haven't noticed any difference. But then again, I haven't been, using a lot of traditional plants for flip-flop winches or high tensile strength things like bowstrings too often. So we just simply interlock, lay them together, get them all in the same direction they want to be going. There's a pileated woodpecker singing for us. Get them all together, and again we start twisting, just like we were doing with the hand rolling method at the beginning, or hand twisting method. Now, you want to get this one really tight before you spin it around. And this one is going to be thinner than this one. That's kind of where that whole weak point subject comes up. So what I usually recommend, instead of trying to splice or taper those splices, just add another strand there for now. And that'll thicken up in that one bulky spot. And yeah, you'll have a bit of a bulk or hump there, but it doesn't really get in the way. It doesn't really become a problem. It doesn't look pretty, but it gets the problem solved for now. And again, I'm just simply twisting, hook, spin, twist, hook, spin, twist, hook, spin, twist, hook, spin, twist, hook, spin. And I'm just going along like that, nice and even, until I get past the splice. And I'm going to continue that. And you can get pretty quick with this. Not as quick as the lap roll method. But I go until I'm past the splice point. You can see all these little frays on this end. Well, that's the end of the splice, and this is the other end of the splice right here. This we can trim off, or we can singe it with the flame of a candle or the flame of our fire, whatever we got. But now I've got all that to work with, and you can start to see how we can keep going with a rope. So I'm going to go back to lap rolling real quick, and we'll see how far we go with this string. So I mentioned you don't want one end thin and one end thick on strands. So I decided I'd make you an exaggerated example right here of what happens. This is our really thin strand, about the same thickness as the ones we were making our string out of originally. And this one's about 3 times as thick. A lot more fiber on this side. And if you look, it comes out almost looking like a corkscrew. Now up here it started looking nice and even, because that's the beginning of the cord, but you start to see this, where one seems to just be twisting around the other. It's not twisting together. They're not even. And at that point, although this basswood fiber has a very high tensile breaking strength, it starts to stretch out even more and more. Instead of twisting together and stretching together evenly, you can see that you have this big strand of thick, and then a little twist of thin, big twist of thick, little twist of thin. And on something that's going to be pulling, or going to be drawn on, like a snare for an animal, or a toggle cord on a toboggan, or anything like that, this is where it's going to break. Not usually with basswood fiber, because it's very high tensile strength. This stuff's probably close to 60-pound test, these strands of cords, especially with that thick mat of strand right there. But when you're working with stuff like milkweed or dogbane, you really have to keep everything even. So there's a little trick to that. If you see that, first and foremost, untwist it. Get rid of that problem to begin with, because that's going to be a problem point. So I'm going to go all the way back up to where it looked nice and even. And that's where I'm going to start fixing my problem. If one strand is thicker, you can do one simple thing, and that is grab some more cord and add it, but that becomes kind of a mess. You start playing with splicing. The other option is called steeling. So I'm going to untwist this big strand, and I'm going to even it out. I'm going to split it in half. I'm going to split half of all the cord onto one side and split the other half to the other side, as it should be. So I'm just going to twist in, break out, split that out, and again I'm going to touch it and feel it with my fingers and see if it feels even. This definitely feels even. So now I have even cords, and I'm just going to quickly lap roll it. And now you see it nice and even. That nice and even cord is going to hold itself together. It's kind of like the old saying, one arrow breaks easy, a multiple of arrows or a bundle of arrows will never break. This is now very strong. Definitely can't break that by hand. So I wouldn't necessarily turn this into a tug of war rope, but it will definitely hold a lot of stress within it because it's nice and even again. It's all about evenness. If your cord looks good, chances are it's going to be good. If it looks ragged, it's going to break ragged. So take your time with your cord, especially when you're first practicing and learning this stuff. Just learn to work with it. If one end seems to get thick, steal some fibers from that side and add them to the other strand. And just play with it. Play with it, get even with it. If you need to make it even look smoother, you can get 2 pieces of wood, sandwich this between them, and pull it back and forth. And it can help kind of iron everything down into one even strand if things are looking bumpy. If you got a bunch of ragged threads sticking out, you can trim them off or singe them off, whatever you want to do. But we can just keep making our rope, however thick we want, however thin we want, as long as we want it or as short as we want it. All comes down to playing with it and practicing. So, with a lot of these plant fibers, you can make very fine cord as we demonstrated earlier. This is a fairly thin string right there you can do. You can make them thicker into more of a dense cord. This is about the thickness I would use for a bow drill string. This is closer to what I would use for tying shelters together, or a snare, or holding a trap together for a Paiute deadfall or what have you. For rope though, we're talking about cable. Thick cable. This is about the thickness of strand we would want to make a thick cable. And that's not easy to do with lap rolling. It's a little tiresome to do by hand rolling, but there's a method of hand rolling we can demonstrate. Now, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, you have to split these fibers all the way down so they can all twist evenly. There's ways to go about that. If you want to make what's called a fiber comb or a fiber frog, you can do it out of bone, antler, wood. We also have one in the Dragonfly tool. It's fiber comb up at the top. Nice sharp serrations up there. And you just simply stick it through and comb it through and tease the fibers. Nice and gently. You don't drive it through. You're not trying to push it through hard. You're just combing it up and letting it break down into these nice fine fibers. That's all you got to do. But for what I'm going to demonstrate, we're going to do what's called mouth rolling. It sounds really weird, I know. And we're just going to make a short one for now. Well, we can make it a little thicker. We can make it a little longer. I just want to make sure all the strands are even. So I'm going to take a few other strands here and there and evenly space them. I'm going to start, let's start right there. And let's say I'm trying to make a rope for a tow cable. By the way, these are Bushcraft scissors. So, let's say I was trying to make a tow cable for a toboggan, or I'm trying to make, actually even the laces for snowshoes, so that I can actually put the snowshoes on my feet. And all I have around me is grass or dry dead cattail, or I find a basswood or poplar whose bark is rotting off. You need to make a nice thick one. So again, we start by making the kink like that, and now we get to practice our ventriloquism. We bite onto that, and to make sure everything is even, we twist both of them clockwise at the same time, the same amount of times. You do that several times. I sound like I have a really weird lisp, don't I? So we keep doing this again and again until it feels really tight, like it's going to kink up again. And then we roll it counterclockwise. And we start again. And I got the kind of nasally voice, and you have no idea what the heck I'm saying. but still practicing my ventriloquism. Eventually, I'm going to be the next Jeff Dunham. So I keep going along, and I keep twisting this way, and twisting this way, and twisting this way. So again, twisting clockwise to you, counterclockwise roll. Twisting clockwise to you, counterclockwise roll. This is really hard to say clockwise in my mouth like this. So I keep going along and going along like this. I got a strand coming out there, so I'm going to steal some from over here and add it to this one. And I keep twisting along, twisting along. Does it look pretty? Heck no, but then again, neither do I. So I'm going to keep twisting and twisting, adding another strand from over here, put it over there. You get the point. That's a pretty thick rope. That's about as thick as my pinky finger. And that stuff ain't going nowhere anytime soon. Now you can actually extrapolate this from one person to actually two groups of kids, each one twisting their own strand, and one person holding it all together and twisting it the other way. So they're twisting it clockwise. These two rows of kids. Let's say you have a youth group with you, a bunch of scouts or cadets with you out in the field. You have 8 on this side, 8 on that side, and you have the cadet leader or the Cub Scout leader at the front here, holding onto it and twisting it counterclockwise while the kids are spinning it clockwise. And as you go, you can make a big cable out of grass, vines, whatever you got around, and at the end of it, the kids have a tug-of-war rope. Easy way to keep them entertained, and a lot easier than having to bring a rope out there with you just for that one little game for the kids in the afternoon. There's stories from guys like Morris Kohansky where a bus got stuck in a snowbank, and while they're waiting for the tow truck, the kids made a tow rope and used a flip-flop winch and pulled the truck or the bus out of the snow. There's a lot of different ways you can do this just by making strong rope by a bunch of fibers that not necessarily are strong on their own. Again, if I just take one of these strands with my fingers, it breaks very easily. But if I hold them all together, bundle them all together, and twist them nice and evenly, and make them twist onto another group, like we have been doing with this reverse wrap method, become very strong. I can't break this, and I'm not going to say I'm, Hulk Hogan or Arnold Schwarzenegger, but then again, I'm not Pee Wee Herman either. I should be able to break something, but I can't. It's pretty strong stuff from very breakable stuff. So that could be grass you find in the middle of winter on a south-facing slope where the snow has melted back and shown that wild grass. It could be bark you found off a tree right there on the spot. It can be fibers that you've processed like we have here out of the basswood bark from last summer. It could be cattail leaves. It could be anything. Whatever fibrous material you have at hand, you twist it how you need to. If it seems to break when you're trying to make small string, make bigger rope. If it seems to be able to twist nice and fine and hold its strength, unlike that apparently. See, I can break this stuff. I'm not weak. But as you go up to that thicker stuff, to the really thick stuff, suddenly the fibers hold together very well. Plant fibers are a great way to learn to weave. Cord making is one of the easiest ways to learn how to work with your hands in the woods. Working your hands like this for hand rolling, lap rolling, mouth rolling. It gives you a little bit different dexterity that your fingers may never have had to use before. And that gets you used to it for when you start doing things like finger weaving a strap out of basswood fiber into a tump line, or weaving baskets out of black ash splints. It gets your fingers used to working all in sequence in different parts of the job. One of my favorite quotes was from one of my mentors, Gino Ferri. He used to say, if you want to be a great piano player, or if you want to be a great basketball player, learn to play the piano. Your fingers learn a different skill and they become stronger in the skill you want. So, get out there, find some plant fibers, even napkins or the sleeves from straws at fast food joints. Sit there and just twist them. Try them out. Take a piece of cord that already exists, like sisal twine or jute twine, and just sit there and try to twist it into a thicker rope. And just keep going from there. Practice, practice, practice. I'm Caleb Musgrave from Canadian Bushcraft. Thank you for watching.